You're listening to Daventry Radio.
How many food banks are there in Britain? Well, no one actually knows the exact figure. It is estimated to be around 1,500. 425 of them are run by the Trussell Trust, a poverty charity based in the UK. But they are not the only organisation in Britain running food banks. There are many independent, local initiatives doing similar work. I visited one of them at the Vineyard Community Church in Daventry. The senior pastor of the church, Rob G, explained that the free food aid is just one part of the institution's services.
The Vineyard is an international movement of churches, and it kind of based around a number of values and priorities, and one of their chief values of the Vineyard worldwide is care and support of the poor. And so obviously we've adopted that as one of our key values, and the food bank is just one way in how we're kind of fleshing that out, how it's happening here in Daventry. We've also trying to help people with budgeting their finances as well. We have a computer suite on site here, which we're also trying to get geared up so that people can come and search for jobs and get back into employment, do their CVs and things like that.
The food bank was started 10 years ago by both Rob and his mum, Linda. She told me how they went about setting it up.
We had the building in town on Warwick Street. The council let us use that, and we saw the opportunity to be able to start a food bank properly. We started off with a tin of beans, and then at first we used to use vouchers to different agencies to give out to their clients, and then Rob did the online system. Subsequently we moved here.
I imagine that working here is not only physically draining at times, but it's mentally and perhaps overall, more than anything else, emotionally draining. Would you agree with that?
It can be, but it depends on how much compassion you've got for people and whether you're capable of letting it go once you've served them, or, you know, and help them in the best way that you can. It's no good sort of carrying that. As a Christian, I give it to God. You know, people are in His hands, not mine. It's rewarding, very rewarding, because you know that you've done all what you can to help somebody.
The Vineyard Community Church in Daventry is not a church in the traditional sense. Even the building is contrary to the way we would normally imagine a church to be. There is no religious symbolism, no steeple, Gothic windows, or any little gargoyles to be seen sitting on top of the roof. In fact, it is a rather unassuming building. It looks more like a warehouse. And when you walk into the food bank, you do not feel as if you have entered into a church or that you are going to be converted in any way. It is a neutral environment. But I asked Linda whether she fears that some people are not approaching the food bank simply because it's associated with a church.
Well, yeah, I think people have been put off by some ways that people approach them, you know, especially like the old way they used to preach in the streets and hellfire and brimstone and all the rest of it, you know. We're not a traditional church, we're more relaxed in the way that we come together, and the way that we worship is more, should I say, up to date. We don't sing the old hymns. So I guess we're just trying to move on culturally as well. The basis of what we believe is still evangelical beliefs. We don't have the vicar with the collar at the front and the traditional way of church this country's been used to. Last year, the Vineyard Church Food Bank processed 760 referrals, which on average equated to 1,700 people receiving a food parcel. Currently, the food bank has around 35 claimants using the service every week. I asked Mike Crozier, one of the volunteers at the food bank, about the referral system.
How does the food bank find out whether someone is eligible to become a claimant of the service? Because surely not just anyone can walk in, can they?
Exactly. If you walked into the food bank and hadn't been referred, you wouldn't get a food parcel. You have to go through a referral partner, and you have to satisfy the criteria that qualifies you. So a typical example would be if somebody goes into citizens' advice because they have an issue with benefits or whatever, then they'll sit down with an advisor, they'll work through their financial circumstances, they'll look for evidence and proof of the individual situation, and if citizens' advice deem it appropriate, then they would refer to us a request for a food parcel, which comes through on an electronic system, so everything's internet based. There's no paper involved in it at all.
How much food are the claimants allowed to take from the food bank?
In terms of quantity, we match the food parcels to the individual circumstances. So if it's a single individual, we will give them a food parcel that's suitable for their needs. If it's a large family with 3 or 4 children, then what we'll do is we'll increase the size of the food parcel to meet their needs and then try and accommodate any special requests that they have. The food that we get is donated, so we are limited in what we can give out as to what we get in. But we try and accommodate size-wise, and then we'll help them throughout the year to try and help them to get back on their feet again.
How poverty-stricken is Daventry and the district?
Currently, Daventry and district is actually very fortunate. You only have to look around you to see the amount of building that's going on. So you've both got domestic houses, you've got commercial premises, so you've got opportunities in all sorts of areas. So in general, if you are able to work and you've got the right skill sets, then you shouldn't have too much difficulty in getting into employment.
I asked the senior pastor, what are the myths that are associated with the food banks, and I asked him to demystify them for me.
Myths that we've heard is that it's people that come and use food banks are generally those who are young people who just simply don't want to work. They just want to get everything freely given to them, just suck everything out of the systems that they possibly can. And whilst I think that's true in some cases, it's certainly not the whole picture. And here in the Daventry Food Bank, we've been sort of helping out people from the teens, sort of 16, 17-year-old, right the way up into their 70s. And so there are people who are working full-time and they just, maybe they've had an illness or something, or just lost their job, or in between jobs or something. It doesn't matter, what sort of age or whatever, it just comes along, crisis comes along. And so it's everybody and anybody, it's not just those certain category of people.
And what would you say to those people who are frightened or feel ashamed about approaching the food bank? What would you say to them to bring them here, to give them the help that you provide?
It is completely understandable when people just feel awkward about their situation. It's a private thing. And we have people come in here in tears, literally in tears, and saying things like, I feel like I'm begging. People just have to recognise that their circumstances are not always their fault. What they will do is if they came here, they'll be greeted and welcomed by a bunch of people who are just open arms, coming in, have a cup of tea. Don't worry about your situation. We're not here to judge. We just want to help. And so we just try to make people feel as comfortable as possible.
If I may, I'd like to read out a quote from the American author Herman Melville, who wrote a short story called Poor Man's Pudding and Rich Man's Crumbs. He said, of all the preposterous assumptions of humanity over humanity, nothing exceeds most of the criticisms made on the habits of the poor by the well-housed, well-warmed and well-fed. This story was published in 1854. Is this quote still relevant?
I could get into the political arena with this, the things I've just been reading, but I try and avoid the political arena. Just, some of the politicians who seem to have their pockets filled and wanted to withdraw certain benefits from. I was only reading this morning about the votes that have just been going through to remove £30 a week from people with disability allowances. It almost feels criminal. Now, I haven't looked at the details behind all that and why those decisions are coming about, so that I'm not educated enough in that sort of to make a valid comment. I don't think so. It just grates a little bit, I suppose.
Okay. If you'd like to find out more about the Vineyard Community Church Food Bank, you can go to their website, which is at www.daventryfoodbank.org.uk.